interviewees and 2 interviewers. It will be one-on-one every time. So we will present the 2 that come. We'll start with Professor Yossi, who is the Vice President Google and the head of Google Center in Israel. Professor Yossi, Matias, please. You're invited to this seat, main upstairs, all the way to the end. And with you is Professor Alex Mintz, who will interview you, the head of the decision-making processes lab from the Reichman University. Professor Mintz, you're invited, please. Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me? Hello everyone. This panel is going to be held according to a different format of one-on-one interviews, and it's done together with Professor Varda Liberman, who's not only an outstanding researcher, but also our Provost and heads the MBA in medical innovation program. So AI has been with us for many dozens of years. There were ups and downs, success stories and failures, and recently there was a major wave that even the CEO of World Google and Bill Gates declared it being a game changer, something very special, and it also ignited some sort of a gold rush in the Silicon Valley and Wall Street and other places in the world of startups. 50%, by the way, of the startups that, according to Ford's, started in Ford, Angel, and Pre-Seed, and it only goes to show how new this area is. The way by which I look at this direction is that some sort of a platform or an aircraft carrier upon which there's so many new engines, for example, text, image, video, code, every field that you might think of. And on the other hand, when it comes to applications in marketing, in retail, in healthcare, in military, banking, finance, investments, you name it, the architecture, the music, it's very, very exciting. And I wanted to ask you, Yossi, if that is truly a revolution. Hello. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. The answer is yes. Perhaps, you know, more about our background. 6 years ago, we as a company, we're an AI-first company. We identified AI as being the next important thing, and I personally starting to shift much of my work. Before that, I was mostly in search, but I wanted to set up a center for AI technologies. 2 or 3 years ago, I could say that this is a transformative technology, and I could say it back then, but to calibrate the place that we're in now, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, and many others thought, that this is transformative, but very few people predicted what actually took place in the last 2 or 3 years. In other words, what we have today is something that even the experts, those who are doing AI for years, simply did not predict. And we can see the development in a way that only accelerates and bring about things that, as I said, and I'll give you examples perhaps, you could not foresee, and that's truly transformative in every field and aspect of our lives. I think that that is a true game changer for every field you can possibly think of. And specifically in Google, perhaps, you can enumerate some of the developments and innovations, and how will that fit into the existing products you already have. First of all, it touches upon everything, but perhaps I'll start with what I devote my attention to. I'm in charge of healthcare, AI in healthcare, AI for the climate crisis. I'll touch upon that too, and perhaps conversational AI, which is what everyone knows. If you go to the supermarket, everyone will tell us what it is. It's changing very rapidly and very significantly. So AI in general, I'll give you a few examples to where it already changes reality around us. Let's start from the climate crisis. As some of the efforts to see how we can help people in the area of climate change, we looked at the question whether we can help when it comes to crises, existing crises like fires and floods, and how can we prevent future crises that emerge from the climate change, the global warming. And AI has a significant role there. I'll give you one example. Forecasting floods. Floods take the lives of thousands every year, and we wanted to see if we could use technology in order to foresee where would be the next flood, to warn people and to save lives. And also property, millions of dollars in damages are the tolls of floods every year. So we didn't know if we could do it, but fast forward, today we have technologies that can foresee exactly where the flood will take place up to 7 days before and to give the warning. We covered 20 countries in the world, and we're continuing to increase this coverage by using AI technologies together with other things like cloud computing, etc. This is something that if you asked me 6 years ago if we could do it, I'd tell you, we have to look into this. We did look into this, but it wasn't that clear. And today we see that it's feasible. And there are many other examples when it comes to prevention of carbon emission, etc. I'll touch upon the healthcare industry. This is something that would impact everyone. For many years, we knew that we could use AI in order to identify, for example, in images, various phenomena such as cancer, growth. And perhaps we'll start with an example of diabetic retinopathy, which causes blindness, and those who can contract it are mostly diabetic patients. 400,000 people are at risk, and an expert can detect it, and once it's diagnosed, it can be treated, but there's a shortage of the physicians who can properly diagnose. A breakthrough research or study a few years ago that was published in JAMA, one of the leading publications, showed that with the AI you can identify the disease in a way that is equal to that of experts. Last September, I went to Bangkok, Thailand, and we already use AI in clinics there, and we saw people walk into a clinic, sit in front of a camera, and after 2 minutes they get the result whether they should take treatment or not. It takes exactly 2 minutes, and they can, within 1 hour, the whole clinic emptied out. A month before that, when they didn't have the AI, they waited for weeks to get the answer, and the result was not as accurate, and many didn't use the information. That's an example for a technology that existed a long time ago. It took a few years for it to reach the clinics, and I'm highly optimistic concerning what can be done with this. But what I can see today is actually a revolution which, pushes us forward. And, for example, the generative AI, the ability to use models, opened unlimited possibilities for us. So the option of large language models with which we can collect data and create the possibility of answering questions. We wanted to see how we can apply it to the medical field. And a few months ago, we shared that we have a model that is called NetPalm that is actually built on Palm, one of the largest language models with the help of which we can run those conversations that we're all aware of. And with this model, we can, for the first time, pass tests such as medical tests given in the US. 3 months later, we showed that we can, with a more advanced model, for the first time, pass what is equal to the medical test in the US with a grade of an expert. What does that do? It opens immense possibilities. We already now have a few partners, and we have to remember that these models have many errors initially. On the one hand, they can identify things that experts fail to identify, but they generate information that is not always reliable. So we have to be very responsible But the possibilities of saving lives are immense, and now we want to see how we can use these models not only to get answers at the level of text and language, but to get medical images and to help decipher them. This is still at very nascent stages, but I believe that when we look forward, we'll see how AI will be an auxiliary tool that every doctor can use and become a lot smarter, a lot more advanced, because that would give auxiliary tools. And it's not only for doctors, it's for the medical system. It's to help with summaries and many things. And actually, we don't know what usages will actually be open. And this is why we're working with partners to look into this and check, and we're waiting to learn what else can be done with these technologies. These are merely examples of what we can do already with AI technologies and apply it to the medical field. Well done. The AI found itself in a way that the generative AI actually has a broader outreach, and the business model as well is more appealing to a larger gamut of companies and investors. However, we do know that there are also dangers and limitations and problems. Not only sort of misguided recommendations and inaccuracies and fake data and fake information and deep fake, and even if you talk about influences that can be considered catastrophic if something is not done on the topic. This technology, because it is so powerful, and moreover, if we're trying to judge and see what progress we saw in the last year or two and try to extrapolate forward, we are incapable of doing this, because the progress made in these fields sometimes are exponential, sometimes are singular, and of course it creates opportunities which on the one hand can save lives and resolve problems of society at large in a very significant way, but on the other hand it creates quite challenging problems. Let's start from the social challenges. The very fact that we need adaptations. We have challenges and opportunities. On the side of opportunities, I tell you that we encourage boys and girls from around Israel to enter the high-tech sphere. We want to see how we bring the understanding of AI and turn it into a tool that everyone can use in the future and leverage. On the other hand, we know that it has a far-reaching ramification to many of the professions. Already now, programmers have to relearn how to do their job, but that would impact so many professions, and we have so many surprises concerning the different sectors in the labor force. We need to see how we leverage it in a positive way and how we mitigate all the negative effects that might emerge. There's another question, of course, how do we prevent improper usage of those options? And that's a huge problem that we talk about by discussing the danger of misleading information. How can you prevent this? So recently we decided to add metadata and tools that would help identify when things are dying by AI. There are important startups doing these things. Some of them we know personally even, but in addition to this, I would even say that before anything else, we have to give thought to the fact that we need to make those models whose contents they create are trustworthy. And that's the reason why one of the things that my team is preoccupied with in the last few years is a study on how do we ascertain that when we create content, text or images, we can truly know that these are factually true or they are consistent with other information that we already have and we can compare with. So the emphasis, and we wrote a number of articles on it, we look proactively of how to do it. There's a big distance still. We know that these models have problems There are errors, inaccuracies, and one of the most important things is that there's a great excitement on how to use all those models of conversation in a daily life, at work, for children, in leisure. We need to know how to use this in a responsible way while taking into account that not everything that is being said there is always accurate 100%. So we have to advance technologies to make them more accurate, but on the other hand, we have to learn how to use them. And also to identify those places where we can use them properly. In addition to this, there's a more important question to all of us. People talk about existential problems. People talk about what would happen if these AI systems will receive the power from the type that will lose control. These are important questions, and we as a society should give some thought to identify where we need to provide frameworks in a smart way, in the right way, because there's so many nuances. How do we make sure that things would not happen as an accident or by bad actors, intentionally, people who want to abuse those systems? How can we create protection frameworks? And as a society, we must think of how to develop those defenses, those technological defense systems, and how to provide the different forms of harnessing technology in a positive way that would not do things that it's not supposed to do. And also to see how we can protect them from the world. We've been learning something over the years. When you have a technology, some people use it positively and others use it negatively. We have to see how we protect ourselves, to the extent that some people say that it can bring the end of humanity. Recently, I published an article together with Jennifer from Reichman in a publication of Wharton, the business management Wharton schools from Pennsylvania, with respect to AI systems. And I wanted to ask you before we conclude, as you know, startups that only start. You have a very senior position in Google, and you've been doing this for many years. What would you propose to new startups in the field? What topics should they enter? I think that the basic principles have not changed, and that is to ask, how can we generate value? How do we take a problem? Always the combination that's most important, and there's no big difference between what startup to set up or which projects do I want to invest in. And we're always looking for the combination of where are those things that you can really make the biggest impact. And you should always look for the cross-section between a problem that is important to solve, and if we solve it, it will create value, and there's a barrier that prevented it from being solved in and of itself, and that there's a chance of doing this with a certain effort. Now, the possibilities are huge, and so many things, but we need to remember that even though when we talk about technology, and ostensibly many people think that that solves everything, that the models will do the job, as soon as you trickle down to the details of every problem we wish to solve, it turns out that the way is still long before we reach full solutions. So part of the complexity of the technological world today is that the pace at which things advance is really unprecedented. Hence, there are things that you might think there's still some possibility, but in 6 months you'll realize that that technology is already there. It's always been the case. Technology has always, advanced very rapidly, but today it's a lot more quicker. And it happens within companies. The pace of change is such that we simply need to not only expect in a linear way what will happen, but to take into account that things will change exponentially. But the principles are the same. Much of what we do today is things that when we started them a few years back, there was some sort of a forecast, like many products that were developed by my team as well, that use AI in order to remove barriers of modality, for example, that you can access information and communicate, and you can allow people use the phone by using the understanding of text and language. Much of what we started with, technology was not yet mature to actually yield it as a product. But we made a forecast, and we thought that within a certain period of time, we will be there. this is why that's the time to invest, because that would really solve a problem for people. So we have to go to the basic principles. What problems do we want to solve? How do we solve them? And as much as we need to give attention and thinking to the dangers and risks and threats and results, the potential results of such things, we should do whatever we do with a great deal of responsibility. There are quite a few technologies that even when we had them, we said, it's too early. It's too early to release it. We're not yet prepared for the release of these technologies. Sometimes it required years, at other times it required months, until it nearly turned into a commodity. On the other hand, our possibilities to improve life, to improve education, to improve medicine, to provide solutions for climate challenges, for new opportunities in every field are immense, unprecedented, and also the possibility for every one of us to find their place in those things at any level. For many years, we've been in a situation that within a very short time, I usually tell students that never in history was there a situation that young people within such a short time could reach a place where they can develop things that would impact the entire world. This has made a quantum leap now. And it's no longer young people. I was in New York recently, and I spoke with the taxi driver, and he said that his friend in high-tech now has to learn new fields of generative AI and to learn how to do prompting and all that. And he himself was thinking, what should he do in his life? And I said, look, this friend of yours has been in technology for many years, but you're no different than him. You can learn the very same things now and find your place in future technologies. So these technologies create possibilities for more people, but on the other hand, those who really delve deeper into them and study the technologies of AI and the future generations of it, the possibilities are so vast. Or they can learn in our, shared program with Google. For example, all those who make it to the program, the world is open before them, and they can advance to whichever direction they want in AI and in general. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Yossi Matias. You won't be here when we talk about the climate change. Thank you, Professor Mintz. You'll be back here in a minute. But now I'd like to invite Professor Varda Liberman, Deputy President for Academic Matters and Head of Medical Innovation. Varda, you're invited. This is your seat. And Eran Yariv, who will talk about R&D AI Microsoft Israel, please.
Hi, Eran. Hi, everybody. Hello. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite. It was in time to introduce you and everybody fully, but we should say that Iran is one of the most significant leaders in AI in Israel today, of course. Now, everybody talks, in these days, everybody's so enthusiastic in AI. We had AI for decades, but everybody's talking about it now, and revolutions usually tend to go slowly. The real entrance was the chat GPT, which created a real buzz, and everybody's talking about it because whether they know what it is or not. But it's not just a buzz around these new things, because the generative AI, meaning the creative AI, is a real watershed moment. And I'm not sure everybody grasps the difference between AI and generative AI. Because what's happening today is that these developments, if it used to be very slow, now developments are so rapid you can barely understand, and the experts themselves are so astonished what's happening every day anew. So please explain the difference. Well, as you said very correctly, we've had AI for decades. And in recent years, it's been accelerated. And everybody here looking, watching a movie on Netflix and getting a recommendation for the next movie, or looking on the internet and navigating by ways. You're all using AI, classic, not generative. that has to do with classification, analysis, and recommendation. And we've had that many years, and of course that as well is being enhanced. Now the watershed moment, the real leap ahead that has happened really in the last few years, that is the field of what you called as well, generative, creative AI, in which systems not only take information and classify information or cluster information, but also create new information on the basis of what they know, with a real profound understanding of language, of natural human language. You can talk to AI, this kind of AI, completely naturally, get natural answers, and with all the overall knowledge that the AI has, with one exception. If Waze knows how to navigate but can't tell you about movies, and a search engine on the internet knows how to give you answers but not navigate, generative AI knows how to give you answers in a broad range of fields and disciplines. Not just one. They don't specialize, and that's again being developed at a rapid pace and are coming to the point of almost human capabilities in the depth, in the scope, in the ability to make deductive reasoning arguments and so forth. So it's not chat that did it. I mean, that was one of the things out of many tools that have done this revolution. But in the same context, so basically everybody's talking about AI, people who know more about it, less. But everybody gets it, that you have to talk about it. But for the average person, I don't think they really understand. And the question is, and people ask, for the average person who doesn't know anything about technology, how will they encounter AI and how will it impact their lives, how they'll be able to use it? Well, one of the analogies that I like the best is that of the automobile industry revolution. Yes, and for many years people went, by horse and carriage. Suddenly in the early 20th century, they said that there was the horseless carriage, the car, and GPT is an engine. You don't, and ChatGPT that you mentioned is like a demonstration platform. It's not what takes you home at night. The first cars that we use, the practical uses, so to speak, here in this world, are now in the final stages of development in factories. We're beginning, most of us are still, according to this metaphor, in a horse and carriage. It hasn't AI transformed our lives right now, for the most part, yet. But it's going to happen very, very soon. Some things have already been released to the market. For example, Microsoft has a vision of helping everybody in the world fulfill their potential, okay? And one of the things that we do is produce a set of tools that are called co-pilots. This began as sort of a developer tool. You write code, you have a co-pilot that overlooks your view, your work, and whispers in your ear what's the next thing to write. You ask this co-pilot simple codes. They give you the complete or almost complete answer, and you create a dialogue between a human specialist and an AI specialist. Now imagine this happening in every field, in every occupation, in Word, within PowerPoint, within Excel, Teams, whatever. In many places, you get a personal assistant that understands what you're doing, helps you finish your sentences, get through your writing block, understand the information required on Excel, transform a document. There's an interaction, full dialogue, natural human speech. You can ask things that are complicated, not just add a title, but write me an article about. And they give you a draft. And at that moment, you begin a dialogue through which you hone and refine the text. You don't replace the pilot, but we've provided you with a co-pilot that does a lot of the, the hard work and gets you to the end line that you'd like to get to, the end product. So I'm sure everybody in their imagination are trying to see what else can be done about you with this AI, but I'm sure that there's no limit. Now, Yossi as well and everybody are also talking about the risks. People, very senior people in the field, including governments, are talking about the risks of AI, are talking about maybe we need to slow down, stop this revolution, and maybe when there's wait for regulation. Noah Harari has been talking about it as the end of all human history. Even Sam Altman, I believe, said, and he's basically the CEO of OpenAI, where all of this started, where ChatGPT was born. He said in the Senate, before the Senate meeting, that he has concerns. So what are the risks, as you see it in Microsoft? What means we as a society and we as individuals do we need to apply in order to be cautious? Well, Spider-Man said that with great power comes great responsibility. And we have the first that understand that we need regulation and legislation around AI, particularly in light of the very strong forces that AI can produce. We are full partners with the government and regulation factors in order to create that benchmark, that threshold. This is not the first time we're doing this, by the way. For many years, we develop software under strict regulations for cybersecurity. In recent years, we have been operating and under very strident regulations for other elements of privacy. And we are also now we're inventing it on the go, responsible AI, basically. Again, we work with a lot of regulation bodies to turn this into an industrial benchmark. But of course this is necessary, what you're describing, for development from A to Z, from concept to implementation. And it's required so that we can say, we have a tested product, we have the tools in order to control, to deal with problems, glitches, we can resolve issues, and we are writing the book, basically, on AI regulation. And is there no concern that will fall into the wrong hands, so to speak? Irresponsible hands that will use it for ill will? I mean, what do you do with that? Here as well, and every new tool that is for the benefit of people can be taken over by bad actors, can fall into the wrong hands. No different from every other technological advancement throughout history. The point is, the tools that we provide to the market, also the commercial market and also the broader markets, are ones that are analyzed, tested, tracked, and monitored. We don't, give it over to every user in a rash and irresponsible way. We produce a lot of checkpoints so that you can't use it for malicious points. Of course, this is not hermetic protection. You can always find ways to penetrate that barrier of protection, and we insist on being part of the gatekeepers who will constantly work against that. So we talked about risks. I hope we didn't scare people too much. And obviously, there's also a revelation, and a revolution, as you called it. AI is not only risk. So AI, Microsoft, I think you told me this a fortnight ago, published research that dealt with the labor force, the labor market, and there's a lot of findings. I did read this article. It's amazing. But particularly 2 points stood out. I saw that over 50% of the workday, of an average workday of an average worker, is wasted, so to speak, on things that are not related to work, communication, emails, and so forth. The question is, how do you see this revolution, and how will it help in that regard? This report is called the Workplace Index. It's something that we publish every few months. The last just was released several weeks ago, and it is fascinating, the findings. I read it. 31 countries, over 31,000 participants in every discipline in the industry, every field. As a statistician, I was very impressed by the scope of this research, by the way. Yeah, I will thank you. I will tell the research team. I will say that you said that. And one of the things that this report reveals is that 64%, almost two-thirds of workers report, so most of their day is what they fulfill what they call digital debt. You go to the office in the morning, you open emails, just emails is an hour. There are chats, there are endless meetings over nothing. Yeah, we all suffer from this waste of time. I'm not even talking about the personal WhatsApp and dealing with your kids and your spouses. I mean, all of that accumulated creates a great big digital debt. And our goal is create the tools to reduce that debt. We can't reduce it to zero, but imagine that you go to a meeting and instead of being the person responsible for summarizing, you are focused on the meeting 100%. You can ask the right questions. You can understand what direction this conversation is going in because you know that there's a digital assistant sitting on in the meeting and summarizing everything for you. Now, that's something that we produce as part of one of our co-pilots for Teams. And that's being developed here in Israel, by the way, Israeli pride. Now, imagine that you could take all of your chats that you have in the organization, like an organizational chat, and get a summary of everything that was said in the last week, divided, categorized according to field and subject, so that you can get up in the morning and instead of investing an hour in emails and chats, 5 minutes. A lot of features that are incorporated in, you don't have to learn a new tool, you don't have to create a new work environment, you don't have to undergo training. They're just streamlined and incorporated seamlessly into your day to reduce your digital debt. That's very important because one of the problems in such technologies is adopting them, particularly for the older crowd. I'm sure that the kids and the young people do it immediately, but it's saying that it's easy to assimilate. Yes, that you don't need any particular training in order to do so. Moreover, it would be built into tools that you're using currently. You don't need to update anything. It's PowerPoint and Word and Excel. You know how to use these things anyway. You're just going into the ecosystem that you've always known. Hundreds of millions of people use it every day. And as those who create the back end of the office, we see statistically where people are wasting time and that happens in every organization, everywhere. And we can create advanced tools so you identify, we identify bottlenecks. For example, useless meetings at night, evening. Why? There's oftentimes we can avoid that and create something much more useful. So that's a personal assistant to your entire career, right? Okay, great. That sounds great. Now, another finding that I saw, which was also remarkable, that on the one hand, something like 50% of people said that they're very concerned for their workplace, very concerned from this revolution, and on the other hand, where they're asked, I think over 70% say, they declare that they will use AI. So how do you explain this paradox between fearing the technology and the desire to use it? Because ostensibly, you're bringing in your own demise. It's a very natural concern. We hear it clearly from every industry, from everybody, of course. And surprisingly, this report also examines and segments populations according to people who only heard AI about AI in the news to people who have actually used AI, the whole range, the whole gamut of people, and have even introduced AI to their day-to-day activities. And here we see a significant drop in the fears and concerns. The more, so I tell you, if you're afraid, use it, it's free, get used to it, and you will be less afraid. And being familiarized with the tools, with the systems, with these limitations, these systems also have limitations, very much reduces fear and makes it from something theoretical to something real that we can introduce into our day-to-day, doesn't matter what you do. And the goal is to try to incorporate between a co-pilot, an assistant, whatever you'd like to call it, and your real life. But the concern is for people who, before they use it, yes, before they actually try it out. So it's still strange. Look, we have human abilities that AI, and I have a lot of respect for AI, that AI still can't do. Creativity, innovation, overall perception, conceptualization, things as humans that help us create the next big thing. Now, when we deal with administration, things that are repetitive, things that are, we don't really need to be creative and use our higher faculties, then we're doing things that AI can do for us. The vision is to let AI take over all of the regular humdrum, mundane jobs, things that are repetitive, to leave us more time for things that are more creative, innovative, and so forth. Believe that it will replace us. Not replace, but I think like every new technology since the dawn of history, it will be a force multiplier. It will make us more productive. I hope maybe happier as well. Okay, Danny Kahneman, we talk about all the variations of decision making, and he said that this revolution convinces him that when AI develops to a certain level, it will replace us as decision makers. So I'm glad that you think differently. The last question, and I'd be glad that you expand on this, because we are in Reichman and as head of the in world of the academics, and we say that a lot of professions will disappear, a lot of jobs will disappear, others will come, new ones will come maybe in their place. Nobody really can predict what's going to happen. But there are certain thoughts. If you had to, advise me, what, in 20 years, what schools will no longer exist or not be relevant, and what will be more relevant, and maybe should we think of absolutely new schools? Well, first of all, prophecy is for fools, as the saying goes, but I would make a bet that there's a high probability that the students studying today in Reichman will probably work in, or at least 50% of them will be in positions and professions that have yet to be invented. The revolutions that we have seen, and this revolution apparently is repeating the pattern of history, they dilute certain professions but create a lot of new ones. A lot of graduates of Reichman work for us and in other companies in the industry in professions that didn't exist until 5 years ago. This creates a lot of subspecialties, a lot of capabilities, and I think the key word is synergy. Know the tools, assimilate them early on, understand how a program for university studies can assist future, just unlike, the University of New York that immediately decided to put the brakes on GPT, on ChatGPT, and teach and understand. There's no today, there's no student that doesn't use internet. And when Computer came out, people said, what? People won't go to libraries. How will we know that it's real homework that they're doing at home? But everybody does it. We use into the internet, and we'll use AI in the same way. It will become another tool in our toolbox, and we have to use it wisely from day one. And you don't have a tip on a certain school that something will happen? No, I don't know, so many possibilities I don't know how to predict. But as I said about kids generally, in this regard as well, my feeling is that our students, they're already there. And what we need is to make sure that the faculty and the lecturers have to be going in that direction, because otherwise, my feeling in this revolution, it's like Alice in Wonderland a bit. Even in Alice in Wonderland required looking at the world from new eyes, but Alice also said in the book that in order to stand in place, you have to run. And that's the feeling, yes, very true. As someone in the field for many years, we are in the middle of a real revolution, not in the beginning, the middle. The outcomes are things that we thought would happen only in years to come. So we're far ahead of the plan. That's thrilling, it's interesting, and we are trying to bring it to our clients in a way that's the most creative. Okay, thank you, Eran. And we will meet again. Thank you, Eran Yariv. Now think as well how we can help moms at home take care of kids. organize logistics. Varda is staying with us for the next session. We like you, Varda. We're keeping you. We won't let you go. And I want to invite Professor Eyal Zimlichman, Chief Transformation Officer and Chief Innovation Officer in Sheba Medical Center.
What's happening?
Hi.
Hi. Eyal and I, we have a long history. We started together with Professor Kreis. We began our famous program. But today we're, with similar titles. Eyal, I mean, it's obvious to everybody that we're talking about a real revolution, really. Something that's going to change our lives in every aspect. And obviously in medicine, it will be very significant. We even see Google dealing with this in an in-depth fashion. We heard about this from Yossi, Matias, but we hear this from other directions as well. Now, before we discuss how it's going to change the world of health, it's important for people to understand the challenges, and you and I discussed the challenges a great deal. What are the challenges facing the health system? We talked about this in our pre-meeting, but try to explain to the participants here what you're trying to tackle first, and then how you're trying to do so. Well, okay, when you begin talking about this subject, first you have to talk about gaps. And the medical world has a lot of gaps. Now, the average consumer may be unaware of that, and that's good. Yeah, that's good, but and we're sometimes more satisfied or less from the services that we get. But there are a lot of failures and gaps. It's problematic not only technically, but can also be something that topple governments and countries. The biggest thing is cost. People don't get that. In Israel, we're relatively secure, but the world of health, globally, the prices are only going up. I mean, think about this. We're willing to pay everything for our health, right? It's not a regular market. When you're ill, you'll go on a plane and go somewhere. Yeah, because who needs the money if you die? Right. And exactly. And technology, in this world, in medicine, the prices are only going up. Now, this is the opposite of everything else. You buy a smartphone, you basically pay for the machine and pay the same amount because that's what, companies have understood what people are willing to pay, and even the price goes slightly down over time. That's not true in the world of medicine. Where the hospital buys an MRI, the next MRI will cost twice as much as the old MRI, and that's how you see it across the board. In the United States, you pay about 20% of GDP on medical expenses, and you can really use a calculator, or use an AI calculator rather, to see where the federal bank is going to go bankrupt because it won't be able to pay about only for health. So the biggest thing is cost. We haven't managed to sort of decipher that code yet. In Israel, we're doing relatively well versus other countries, but that's one problem, cost. The second issue, which is very severe in regards to the safety and quality of care. We hear this now, an article 3 months ago from the New England Journal of Medicine published that said that 27% of all hospitalization end with harm to the patient due to the hospitalization. Meaning, and it's not actually infections. Yeah, we know about hospital-acquired infections. Some of it is hospital-acquired infection, but other things, side effects of medications, medication mistakes, the whole list of issues that happen in hospital. In the day in which a hospital is closed, people's lives are saved. Is that true? There's an old joke, and I'm not sure if it's... I won't be allowed to go back to Sheba if I agree with that statement, so I won't respond. But I think the bigger problem is that in the 1991, they made that number, how many people are hurt, and that was lower back then. So we are going up in the number of people that are damaged, hurt, injured during hospitalization. How do you explain this? Medicine has become so much more complex. The medications that we provide, the treatments, the patient's conditions. I don't want to get into, I won't get into it because we'll never get to AI, which is our subject. But when I was in medical school in the Technion years ago and we saw a patient, like 90 plus years old, that was an event to see a 90-year-old guy. Today, that's the average age of an internal medicine ward. So the older age, the number of problems and conflicting people used to die of cancer. Most people today don't die of cancer. They continue to be chronically ill. They have a lot of hospitalization and treatments, and the costs go up and up, but they stay alive. And that's problematic because on the one hand, we want to do our best for patients. On the other hand, how do we maintain that the system is sustainable over time? And another thing is, and this has to do with AI, is personnel, HR, in all of our medical professions. If I look to 100, for example, medical directors and heads of hospitals over the United States, I would be very surprised if only 99% of them said that their biggest problem isn't staff. There's no nurses in the U.S. Nobody wants to be a nurse. Regulation is even stricter, that it requires that if they have to have a certain number of nurses per number of patients, and they pay huge amounts of money, not only for nurses, doctors as well, other medical professions. We will see the drop in the number of physicians and nurses. You'll see where we're going in terms of AI. And the last problem that we've all experienced is that the system is not yet focused enough on the patient. We've built a system over the years that is more focused on the doctor, on the medical staff. Now we're trying to be patient-centered. We want to look at, just like, consumer-centered, as in the commercial market, we have to be patient-centered. And the patients are aware of that. But when has we been focused about the treaters and not the treatees? We talk about the comfort, the convenience for the doctor. Yes, everybody waits for the doctor. It sounds natural for you to wait for the doctor's appointment, but it's not a trivial point. It shouldn't actually occur, and we need new solutions in order to resolve these problems as well. Well, I apologize. This is so fascinating. But if this is the case, even more importantly, I know that you did, when we met, we talked about this, that you're doing AI in Sheba, but now we have, generative AI, the new evolution of AI that can, a lot more can be done with it. So how is that going to change the face of medicine and everything that you've described? Up until now, we've been in a process of evolution, step-by-step changes. From 2015, we introduced AI. It's not new to Sheba. There's almost no doctor in an advanced hospital today that doesn't function with AI. It's part of the natural evolution of events. And I'm sure that Yossi talked about this earlier as well, that he said that there are worlds in which we can easily use AI. Imaging, for example. Imaging is great. Machine learning and deep learning, they know how to look at images and analyze and recognize patterns and things that the human eye finds it difficult to see. So imaging, pathology, where you have to look and decipher images, you have to look things through a microscope. It's digitalized today. Video is digitalized today. We know how to use AI for that. That's what we've been doing for years, very successfully. And Sheba Medical Center is at the forefront of this development. And we are the one who provided the first AI FDA-approved solution, which is for CT imagery deciphering machine, and that began in 2018. It left Sheba then as a startup company, which is called ADOC, and they're taking over the world. Yes, just like every other startup company wants to do, but in 2023, it's now in 1,200 hospitals around the world and is saving lives. But that's evolution. That's AI. Okay, that's the old AI. What about the new generation of AI? And here, as you have already heard, we're talking about a real revolution. We're talking about exponential leaps ahead, and because of the profound need in the medical world for solutions for the whole range of issues that I've already enumerated, I think this is the most fertile ground in order to try to see how we can resolve issues. I'll give you just a couple of examples, maybe just off the bat, things that are being done on one level or another and will be fully implemented very soon. So one of the things, and this was Eran from Microsoft, he mentioned, we want to help our users, right? We want to summarize meetings for you. So let's imagine a regular day-to-day. Everybody sadly has gotten through this. You go to the doctor's office. Right? You're a patient. You tell them tell them what's wrong with you. And the doctor on the other side of the table is typing away. Sometimes maybe they look up for a moment to establish eye contact, maybe a glimpse. So this is your medical encounter, where the doctor really has no time to bring in all of the information, summarize it verbally. They also have to produce documentation for you, to give you the referrals and to give you the summary and to give you medication prescriptions, whatever. Now let's imagine within 5 years, say, that you go to the doctor's office and you have an appointment, and there's, instead of a computer, there's a microphone, and there's no table between you and the doctor. There's just a mic, and the doctor is looking at you and summarizing with you. And I, as the doctor, say to the patient, I'm going to send you to a CT, and I want you to go to an ophthalmological consult and come back in 2 months. In real time, the referrals, the prescriptions, whatever, are produced while I'm talking, and that's it. And I had a very pleasant conversation with my patient, and they had a great conversation with me, and we just talked. And that will save time. That will improve communication, interpersonal communication. So if, for example, you asked how AI can help us communicate as humans, that's one example. And we're going to talk more as humans because of this revolution of recent months. Microsoft is working on it. I assume many other companies are working on it as well, but this is what is going to become the standard. And this is just one example of many. The patient themselves, the patients. I mean, we want to be consumers of health, right? Health services. If I have a question right now, I don't want to make an appointment to a doctor in 2-3 weeks a month. I want an answer now. And the issue of availability of information, of the ability to consult with doctors in real time, AI will allow me through chat services, and there's with somebody a lot more capable on the other side, and then thus far, and they'll be able to give me questions right now and help me decide, do I have to go to the ER right now, or can I wait until tomorrow morning, or can I make an appointment in a week and that will be fine? A lot more availability. And somebody talked about JAMA before. JAMA published another very interesting article just in the last week or two, in which they took a chat conversation between patients and ChatGPT, and conversations between them and a real-life doctor, and they read the scripts of both before judges, and the judges couldn't say who was a real doctor and who was a ChatGPT. The human and machine gap has been narrowed infinitesimally. So that's something that we've been doing in recent months. And the final, third example, taking it to a higher level, we talked about cost. We know now that there is what we call the basket committee. It doesn't exist anywhere around the world. It's called the Health Services Basket Committee, meaning the committee that determines in the Health Ministry of the State of Israel what medications, what treatments are included. I think AI will do a better job in determining what should be part of the basket, and it will be free of any politics influences things that occur when humans are involved, and I think this is something that is on the part of from the doctor side of things all the way through the patient side and perspective. This is astonishing. I mean, really, ostensibly, it does everything. So maybe, as I said to Eran, maybe we won't need doctors anymore. Maybe ORs will have, robot surgeons, and we'll meet doctors to, robot doctors. Maybe that will cut costs. We don't see it in the next future, in the near future.
We are not seeing this as possible in the foreseeable future. There's a well-known phrase that I didn't say, that AI will not replace doctors, but doctors that will use AI will use those who don't, and that will happen. And those who won't know how to work with AI will have a significant disadvantage, and they won't stay in the labor market. And this is something that will happen very soon. Still, the human aspect, the patient still wants to see the doctor, the human doctor, but AI is in the backdrop, and it helps us when the doctor is not available, and it helps the doctor make more informed decisions as well as the patient. And that's what we're going to see in the next few years. What will happen in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time? Well, prophecy was given to the fool. It was said before me, and no doubt that I would not rule out the possibility that one day AI will replace doctors. But that's too distant in the future. It's for science fiction books. You mentioned earlier studies and training, and we're building a medical school together in the Reichman University, and how would that impact the studies of medicine? And that is something that we daily discuss, how to train the future physicians in the GPT world, and that's critical. And here too there will be medical schools who will understand that and make the necessary changes in the methodologies and contents, and there will be those medical schools that won't. So instead of adopting, they should already learn in following that methodology. Our time is up, but so perhaps you can say very briefly, you signed a very important agreement with Mayo Clinic. Perhaps we should mention it very briefly. 2 weeks ago, it's really fresh, we signed 4 leading hospitals in the world, Brazil, Israel, Canada, South Africa, that creates a joint information platform, the only one in the world, and it will do beyond the inherent information in the medical files. It will contain all the textual information typed by doctors, but it will do it in an agnostic language, no matter if it's in French, Portuguese, English, or Hebrew. It will be one, and this will be revolutionary when it comes to developing tools in large language models. We keep talking about the fact that it's hard to evaluate and foresee. Thank you very much. That was truly riveting. Thank you very much, Professor Varda Liberman. And now I will invite once again Professor Alex Mintz and also Professor Shai Shwartz, Chief Head of Technologies from Mobileye. So, Shai, what is actually required to have an autonomic vehicle? We heard a lot about AI, and people perhaps do not know this or are not really centered on it, but in an autonomous vehicle, there's so many elements of AI. The interesting thing about it, and the singular thing about it, is that we have technologies which are very sophisticated. We heard many examples, and everyone's keeping in their pockets a smartphone, which is rife with very sophisticated technologies. We also have technologies which are not that sophisticated, but they require a level of safety and reliability that is extremely high. For example, if you go to the airport and board a plane, the human society doesn't like finding its death on aircrafts. So aircrafts are very reliable, but they're also very simple. What is special about autonomous vehicles is that on the one hand, it's a piece of technology that is extremely complicated, but on the other hand, it is a piece of technology that requires a high level of reliability. And the question is, how can we take components that involve a lot of AI and reach that level of reliability that is required in an application such as autonomous vehicles? That is a challenge of AI, that the autonomous vehicle is perhaps the central scene where that is attacked. So to explain what elements an autonomous car has, let's talk about what is necessary in order to drive. In robot methodologies, we talk about the triangle of sense, plan, and act. In other words, first of all, we need to sense what we see, perception, what do we see around us, where are the vehicles, where are the pedestrians, and where is the road. We also need to plan ahead, and this is thinking about future things, not the present. In sensing, we're looking at what lies ahead of us now. In the planning stage, we're planning on whether I want to bypass a certain vehicle. Do I want to find my way in the lane before or after a vehicle? Do I want to have a right of access to another car? And we need to operate, in other words, to give commands to the vehicle in order for it to execute the planning that we chose. So that's this trinity, that triangle of robotics. But we also have the mapping. We need to know where we want to go. So this is the technology, but the question is, what's so complicated about it and what can go wrong? Anything that goes wrong with human drivers can go wrong with an AI machine that drives. For example, we can say that I was blinded by the sun. That's a problem of senses. Sensing, we can fall asleep on the wheel. It can be a bug in the software. We can, God forbid, get a heart attack, so that would mean that we have a failure in the hardware, right? We can say that I was sure he would allow me to drive into the lane before him, so that has to do with a planning problem. And sometimes we can push the gas instead of the brake, so that's a control system error. So anything that can go wrong here can go wrong there, and we see it all. Many components in an autonomous vehicle involve AI, because ultimately, if we think about this entire event of hitting the road with this box that weighs over a ton and drive at a speed that is higher than 100 kilometers per hour in this 1-ton box, every tiny thing that we make a mistake in can go wrong. So we must identify all the pedestrians around us and all the other cars at a level of reliability not of 99%. That's very bad. We need 99.999999. And we need to do the same in the decision-making processes. How can we reach a state in which the decision-making process of the autonomous car doesn't do something foolish? For example, we mentioned generative AI and ChatGPT, which are incredibly impressive with respect to their capabilities, but very often they write nonsense, right? Very often they invent things. How do we get to a state in which an autonomous car would not talk foolish things and invent things? So you have to tackle these matters. And if I go back to what I started with, the major challenge in an autonomous car is, on the one hand, many components of AI, which are extremely complicated. But what we need is a level of reliability of an aircraft that has a far simpler technology. When do you think there will be such an autonomous car? It's an outstanding question. Excellent indeed. When we ask when will we have an autonomous car, the answer is that we already have an autonomous car. And we need to sort of hone in and see exactly what we mean when saying an autonomous vehicle. I'll explain the different types of autonomous vehicles. There are those that are called robot taxis. It's not owned privately. It is owned by a company that operates them as a taxi service. Usually these vehicles are extremely expensive. It's not something that a person would buy, but as a taxi, and as a company, we can afford it because of the fact that it serves many people. Such autonomous vehicles already drive around the world. Companies like Waymo and Cruise operate these autonomous taxis in places in the US, in San Francisco, in Austin, and they actually drive and function. That's one type of an autonomous vehicle. Another one is something that we tend to think of more and fantasize of more, especially when we go to Jerusalem, Herzliya, and we leave home at 10 o'clock in the morning and you discover that even then it's all jammed. These are the consumers' vehicles, consumer cars. That can drive on their own. Can I buy a car that at one point I say, I don't feel like driving, I want to push a button, and the car would drive on its own? So when I came here from Jerusalem, from the Mobileye offices to Herzliya, it's exactly what I did. I walked into a Mobileye autonomous car. It belongs to the C-Curve Chinese company, and Mobileye generates an autonomous system for it. It's a consumer car. Anyone can buy it. It is sold at the moment only in China, but we do hope that later on it will reach other locations in the world and also in Israel. We push a button and that car drives from Jerusalem to Herzliya to the opening, the entrance to the parking lot. It is licensed in Israel. I try not to break the law. And indeed, this car led me safely from Jerusalem to Herzliya. These are consumer cars, and they also exist today. The problem is that there's always an asterisk there. So what does it say? In 2017, I wrote an article together with Professor Amnon Shashua in Mobileye about the major challenges that the industry of the autonomous car is facing, in the sense that what dangers might befall them unless we contend with them properly to a winter of an autonomous vehicle, just like we had the winter of the AI before the current revolution. So what things are there that unless we pay attention to them, this industry would be destroyed by them? So we placed emphasis on two things. The first one was the safety element, which is trivial. Of course, we ultimately want vehicles to be extremely safe, but it's easier said than done, or then defined accurately when we're saying certain. What do we mean exactly? So that's one element of the industry. Another, which is no less important, is the scalability element and the sustainability, the economic sustainability. You can always build autonomous car that won't be cost effective to keep and to offer a service with. What we see around the world is it's exactly that the industry actually fell into these two pits. On the one hand, we have vehicles that are relatively safe, like the robo-taxi in San Francisco and Austin. However, their financial sustainability or feasibility is dubious. The companies that operate these vehicles lose millions of dollars annually, and the climate of investment looks at it with fear and says, will this hold? Will this be sustainable? And is the industry of autonomous car to die soon? On the other hand, we have other companies like Tesla that represents the consumer cars, and the element of financial feasibility is definitely functioning. It's a highly successful companies, but fears arise concerning the safety of the systems that actually are in those cars. And the main challenge is to solve these two together. In other words, to lead to something that is financially suitable for private consumers, but on the other hand, answers standards of safety that would be suitable. How do you do that? Mobileye's approach has always been that these two things, the robo-taxi and the consumer cars, are two aspects of the very same system. We're not building a separate system for one and for another, but rather one system, and the transition from consumers to robot taxi is an incremental transition with the addition of redundancy components and not a moonshot. Not every time you change something small, we have to start the whole process from scratch because it doesn't have financial sustainability to it. So the principle that we develop is one that will receive autonomous cars that will be more and more capable over time while maintaining the financial sustainability at all times. I do expect that in 3 years' time, consumers will be able to buy vehicles that in certain areas will be able to drive totally autonomously without looking at the road. Thank you. Perhaps before we conclude, can you please share us with the developments and novelties of Mobileye and other companies made in the field of AI? AI in general. Okay, so as has been said by the previous speakers, and they covered it rather nice, we are in the midst of a great technological revolution. I gave a lecture a while ago in the Tel Aviv University about, out of my own personal career perspective, I started working on machine learning in 2000, and since 2000 to date, I experienced 6 revolutions, great revolutions. And I saw that you started in music, of all places. Yes, but in AI, we underwent 6 revolutions. The first one happened in 2000 to 2010 with the machine learning revolution. It then took another 7 to 8 years to see the deep learning revolution that happened between 2012 to 2016-17. From 2018 to date, within 4 or 5 years, 4 more revolutions took place. The generative AI, the consolidation revolution, another one seemed to real. Everything that is talked about is in the virtual world, but when we talk about autonomous car, we enter the human sphere. And perhaps the jewel of the crown of AI is the logical reasoning. Namely, if we think about the most impressive thing in those buds that we witness in the large language models is the reasoning. There's a difference between a learning system that knows how to integrate in its distribution those examples that it witnessed, and it includes them in the distribution. Inference means going out of the distribution, and perhaps that would be the next big thing. Well done, and thank you very much.